The encounter. The planet was a barren wasteland. A heavy silence hung in the air, broken only by the faint hum of the woman's emergency beacon. She had crash-landed hours ago, her ship now little more than twisted metal and scattered debris, alone, stranded. Her name was Lyra, and she was far from the safety of civilization. Her only hope of survival was the thick jungle that stretched for miles ahead. She needed water, food, and shelter. But in this place, even the trees were no friends. The planet was known for its dangers, wild creatures that prowled the night, poisonous plants that could kill you with a single touch, and the eerie feeling of always being watched. Lyra knew she had to keep moving, or she would die here, forgotten, by the galaxy. As she wandered through the thick forest, her eyes darted nervously, scanning the shadows. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there. Her instincts told her to hurry, to find shelter, but she couldn't help herself. Her curiosity got the best of her. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end when she heard a low growl, deep and rumbling, coming from the dense foliage ahead. Lyra froze, heart racing. There was no mistaking that sound. She had heard stories of the apex predator, a creature so feared across the galaxy that even the bravest hunters dared not hunt it. The apex predator was a beast of myth. Its massive, muscular body, sharp claws, and glowing eyes could tear through anything in its path. It was said to be the last of its kind, living alone on this hostile planet, hunting anything that dared enter its territory. And now, Lyra had wandered straight into its hunting grounds. The growl echoed again, closer this time. She could feel the ground vibrating underfoot as if the predator was drawing nearer. Panic surged within her, but she forced herself to stay calm. She had no weapon, no way to defend herself. Her only chance was to stay quiet and still. But then she saw it. Through the dense trees, she caught sight of the creature. It was enormous, standing at least 10 feet tall. Its dark, scaled skin shimmered in the dim light, and its eyes glowed with an eerie green hue. It was moving slowly, dragging its massive body through the undergrowth, blood dripping from a wound in its side. The sight of it sent a chill down Lyra's spine. She could feel the weight of its gaze on her, and for a moment, time seemed to freeze. She was face to face with the galaxy's most feared creature, and all she could do was stand there, paralyzed by fear. But then, something strange happened. Instead of attacking, the creature stopped. It turned its head toward her, its glowing eyes locking with hers. Lyra's breath caught in her throat. Was it waiting for her to make the first move? Was it deciding if she was worth killing? Lyra's heart raced as the beast staggered forward, its large, blood-stained body slowly closing the distance between them. She didn't know what to do. Should she run? Fight? Or should she stand her ground, hoping that some miracle would spare her life? Without thinking, Lyra took a step forward, her instincts pushing her toward the creature. It was wounded, clearly struggling to survive. Something in her couldn't just leave it to die. Her hands trembling, she reached into her bag and pulled out the last of her emergency rations, some protein bars. She tossed one on the ground between them, cautiously backing away. The predator didn't move for a long moment, and just as Lyra was about to turn and run, it took a step forward. Slowly, it sniffed the food. Then, to her astonishment, it ate. The moment was surreal. She, a tiny human, was feeding the galaxy's most feared apex predator, and for the first time in a long while she felt a strange sense of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could survive this. The bond forms Lyra hadn't expected to wake up the next morning. But as sunlight filtered through the dense foliage, casting soft beams of light on the ground, she found herself still alive. The predator, having eaten, had retreated into the shadows of the jungle, and Lyra had somehow found sleep, despite the lingering tension in the air. At first, she wasn't sure what had happened. Had the creature spared her life out of curiosity, or was it simply too weak to act? She wasn't about to wait around to find out. Her heart still pounded in her chest as she checked her surroundings, every sense alert. She wasn't foolish enough to think the predator would just leave her alone after a single meal. But as she stepped cautiously into the clearing, her eyes widened. There it was. The apex predator. It wasn't stalking her. It wasn't glaring with its glowing eyes, waiting to strike. Instead, it was lying on the ground, still, almost as though it was resting. Its massive chest rose and fell slowly, and its sharp claws, which had once been poised to tear her apart, were now tucked beneath its body. Lyra took a cautious step closer. Her curiosity overtook her fear as she observed the creature up close. Its once ferocious exterior now seemed more vulnerable, wounded and weary. The gash on its side, which had bled heavily the day before, was slowly starting to heal. It hadn't just fed, it was recovering. As if sensing her approach, the predator's head lifted slightly, and its eyes flickered open. This time, they weren't filled with hunger or malice. They were different. There was a flicker of recognition there, a strange understanding, as though the creature saw her not as prey, but as something else entirely. Lyra froze, unsure of how to react. She hadn't come here to make friends with a monster. She had no idea what kind of creature this was, let alone how to communicate with it. But somehow, their shared silence felt less threatening now. The apex predator's gaze softened, if only for a brief moment. The air between them seemed to hum with an unspoken connection. Lyra knew she should leave, get back to searching for food and shelter, but something in her couldn't walk away. There was something about this creature that called to her, a quiet plea that she couldn't ignore. She knelt down a little further, her breath slow and steady as she reached into her pack and pulled out a few more protein bars. She tossed them gently toward the predator, just as she had done the day before. This time, though, she didn't step back immediately. Instead, she watched, waiting. The apex predator sniffed the food, its nostrils flaring, but it didn't eat right away. Its gaze remained fixed on her, the suspicion still lingering. But there was something different in its eyes now, a flicker of trust. Slowly, it leaned forward, cautiously sniffing the food, then began to eat. Lyra's heart skipped a beat as she watched the scene unfold. In the span of just one day, the most dangerous creature she had ever encountered was now not just tolerating her presence. It was eating from the same hand she offered. She had no idea what had changed, what had shifted in the predator's mind. But one thing was clear. They were no longer strangers. As she sat there in the soft sunlight, watching the creature devour the food she had given it, Lyra felt an unexpected sense of relief. Maybe, just maybe, this strange and terrifying creature was more than what she had been told. Maybe it wasn't just a beast of terror. Maybe it, too, was just trying to survive in a world that didn't make sense. And in that moment, Lyra knew something had begun to form between them. Something she couldn't yet explain, but something that might just change the course of her survival. The test-as days passed. Lyra's strange alliance with the apex predator deepened. The jungle, once a place of terror and solitude, began to feel like home. Her initial fear of the creature faded, replaced by an unsettling sense of curiosity. She had fed it, tended to its wounds, and in return, it had guarded her. But was that all there was to it? Could she trust it completely? Every night, Lyra found herself awake, listening to the sounds of the jungle. The quiet hum of insects, the distant calls of strange birds, and the unsettling rustle of movement just beyond, the tree line. But each time she heard something else, something far closer. The deep rumbling growl of the predator, the low vibrations in the air that warned her of danger. The creature was always near, watching, protecting. But Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that something was brewing beneath the surface. It wasn't until one evening, as the sky shifted from soft orange to the deep purple of twilight, that Lyra's suspicion was put to the test. She had gathered some berries, rare, nutritious ones she had found hidden deep within the forest. As she sat by a small fire, carefully inspecting the fruits, the predator was lying not too far away, its eyes always trained on her. The air felt thick with tension. The creature hadn't moved much all day, but she knew better than to let her guard down completely. Suddenly, The ground beneath her feet trembled. A low, vicious growl erupted from the trees. Ilara's heart pounded. Her breath caught in her throat. She didn't need to look to know that something else was nearby. A new threat. Her eyes locked onto the predator, who slowly rose to its feet, the powerful muscles rippling beneath its dark scales. It wasn't the first time she had sensed the presence of something dangerous in the jungle, but this felt different. There was no time for hesitation. She grabbed the small knife she had scavenged from the wreckage of her ship and gripped it tightly. She knew she wasn't prepared for what was about to happen, but she had no choice. From the shadows, another creature emerged. This one smaller but still formidable. A vicious four-legged predator with gleaming teeth and ferocious claws. It growled and circled her, its eyes fixed on the apex predator, as if daring it to step forward. For a moment, everything was still. The predator stood in front of her, its massive frame casting a shadow over her. Lyra watched in silence, hoping for something, anything, to happen. She didn't know what she expected, but she knew this was the moment. The creature had been her protector, but now it was faced with a decision. Would it protect her, or would it turn on her when the true test arrived? The smaller predator lunged, its jaws snapping, aiming for Lyra. But before she could react, the apex predator was there. With lightning speed, it slammed into the attacker, sending it crashing to the ground. The fight was brutal. Claws scraped against scales, teeth snapped against flesh. The roar of the battle echoed through the trees, a sound that would chill anyone who heard it. Lyra stepped back, her eyes wide in disbelief. The creature fought with a ferocity she had never imagined, defending her without hesitation. She had feared it, respected it, but now for the first time she understood something else entirely. This creature, this apex predator, wasn't just an animal. It wasn't just a killer. It was something more, something that had chosen to protect her, and now it was willing to put its life on the line for her survival. In the end, the smaller predator was defeated, its broken body left behind in the dirt. The apex predator stood over it, panting heavily, but unscathed. It turned to Lyra, its glowing eyes locking onto hers once more. For a moment, neither of them moved. The jungle seemed to hold its breath. And then, to Lyra's surprise, the creature lowered its head, almost as if bowing to her, acknowledging their bond. She couldn't speak. She didn't need to. The answer was clear. The test had been passed, and with it, the unspoken truth. The predator was not only her protector, it was her partner in survival. The trust, the days in the jungle stretched on, and with each passing hour, Lyra's trust in the apex predator grew. At first, she had relied on it out of necessity, but now something deeper was forming. There were moments when she would look at the creature and see something more than just an apex predator, something capable of understanding, of feeling, perhaps even of caring. But Lyra wasn't naive. She knew better than to let her guard down completely. The jungle was unforgiving. The longer she stayed, the more she realized how fragile their bond was. Trust, after all, was a delicate thing. One wrong move and everything could unravel. The predator had proven itself time and again, but Lyra couldn't forget the monster it had once been. What if one day it grew hungry again? What if it decided that she was no longer useful? These thoughts gnawed at her as she wandered deeper into the jungle, searching for resources, always with the creature at her side. The predator's presence was both a comfort and a curse. It was a constant reminder that no matter how much she tried to control her fate, she was still at the mercy of the jungle and its merciless creatures. One day, while Lyra was gathering some plants near a river, she noticed the predator acting strangely. It was standing in the tall grass, its ears perked, its body rigid. The glowing eyes that once watched her with a mix of curiosity and caution were now alert, scanning the surroundings. The air felt tense, charged with anticipation. Lyra instinctively reached for the small weapon she carried, but before she could move, the predator let out a low growl, its gaze fixed on something in the distance. Lyra followed its line of sight, and her blood ran cold. A figure emerged from the trees. It was humanoid in shape, but not human. The creature was tall and gaunt, with skin that shimmered like the surface of a pool. Its eyes were hollow, dark pits that seemed to absorb the light around them. Its presence was chilling, and Lyra could feel a sense of danger radiating from it. The predator growled louder, stepping forward protectively. Lyra instinctively took a step back, her heart racing. Who, or what, was this new threat? The figure didn't speak. It merely advanced slowly, its movements deliberate and unnervingly calm. Lyra's mind raced. She had never seen anything like this before. It was like a shadow, a wraith that didn't belong in this world. But the apex predator wasn't afraid. It faced the creature with all the ferocity it had shown when protecting Lyra, its claws unsheathed, ready for battle. The two beings stood, still for a moment, each sizing the other up. Lyra could see the tension in the air, thick enough to cut with a knife. She didn't know who would win in a fight between these two creatures, but she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going to sit idly by and wait. Her instincts kicked in. She reached for the nearest sharp object, a large rock, and hurled it toward the shadowy figure. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was all she had. To her surprise, the figure reacted, flinching away from the projectile. It paused for a moment as if reconsidering its approach. The predator didn't waste the opportunity. With a roar, it lunged forward, closing the distance between it and the figure in a flash. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest as she watched the battle unfold. It was fast, brutal, and yet strangely beautiful in its raw intensity. The apex predator moved with an unmatched fluidity, its strikes precise and deadly. But the shadowy figure was no slouch. It fought with a cold, detached grace, seemingly unaffected by the blows it took. Lyra stood frozen, torn between the primal instinct to run and the need to stay and help. She had never felt more powerless. But in that moment, something unexpected happened. The predator, her protector, let out a fierce cry and managed to land a decisive blow. The figure staggered back, its form flickering as if it were made of shadows rather than flesh. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the creature vanished, melting back into the jungle like mist at dawn. The predator stood there, breathing heavily, its chest rising and falling. It turned to face Lyra, its eyes once again glowing with that strange, almost human understanding. For the first time, Lyra felt something shift inside her. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living. And the creature at her side, the one she had feared and mistrusted, was no longer just her protector. It had become her partner. In the heart of this jungle, amidst its dangers and shadows, a bond had been forged, a bond that neither of them could have predicted. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about trust, and it was about what they could achieve together. The dark passed. The jungle was silent that night, the usual hum of life muted by the heavy tension in the air. Lyra sat by the fire, her thoughts drifting to the strange encounter earlier that day. The shadowy figure, what was it? Who was it? And why had it come for her? But as her gaze shifted toward the apex predator, still lying nearby, a new question lingered in her mind. She had come to rely on it, to trust it, but she knew almost nothing about its past. What had this creature endured before they met? What dark history had it been carrying all these years, hidden beneath its brutal exterior? The fire flickered, casting long shadows across the jungle floor, and Lyra felt a sudden weight in the air. She wasn't sure why, but she knew that tonight, something would be revealed. She wasn't just the woman who had fed a predator anymore. She was beginning to understand the creature's silence, its guarded nature. And she wanted to know more. She hesitated for only a moment before calling out, her voice barely a whisper in the still night. "What happened to you?" she asked softly, her eyes fixed on the creature. It didn't answer, but it didn't have to. There was something in its gaze, a flicker of hesitation, as if it was considering whether or not to share its story. The predator's massive head lifted, and for the first time it seemed to study her more intently. The air between them shifted, as if an invisible barrier was being broken down. It took a few slow steps toward her, its movements graceful, despite its size. Then it did something Lyra hadn't expected. It sat down beside her, its body language calm, almost vulnerable. And then, to her amazement, the creature spoke. The voice wasn't one she heard aloud, but it was inside her head, clear and resonant like a whisper in the dark. "I was not always like this," the creature's voice said, deep and heavy. "I was once a servant, a weapon in the hands of those who sought to control the galaxy. I was born to destroy, to be a tool of war." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. She had known the creature was dangerous, but she had never imagined. It had once been part of something much larger, much darker. "My purpose was to kill, to obey, and I did, without question. Until one day, I was left behind, discarded. My creators did not care for my survival. They sent me to this forsaken planet, to die alone." The words echoed in Lyra's mind, and a shiver ran down her spine. She had never considered that the creature might have been a victim in its own way. It had been made to be a monster, shaped by others for their own purposes. But now it was alone, the last of its kind, lost in a world where survival was no longer about following orders. It was about choosing its own path. "I thought I would die here, as they had intended. But then you came." The voice continued. "You fed me when I was weak. You saw me not as a weapon but as something more. I do not understand why, but I have never felt this way before." Lyra's heart clenched as the weight of the creature's words sank in. This was not just a beast, a mindless killer. It was a soul, scarred by the past and shaped by forces beyond its control. It had chosen to protect her, not because it had to, but because something inside it had shifted. "I am no longer what I was," the creature said, its voice softer now. "I owe you my life, but I also owe you something more. I owe you my freedom." For a moment, there was silence. Lyra didn't know what to say. The predator's past had been one of violence and manipulation, and yet it had found something new in her, a chance for redemption, a chance for change. And in that moment, Lyra realized that they were not so different after all. Both of them were survivors, trying to escape the ghosts of their pasts. The jungle around them seemed to breathe with a quiet understanding. They were both shaped by forces beyond their control, but together, they had the chance to redefine who they were. They could choose what came next. "Thank you," Lyra whispered, her voice trembling slightly. She wasn't sure if the predator could hear her, but somehow she knew it did. The creature didn't respond. It didn't need to. Instead, it lowered its head slightly, a gesture of acceptance, as if to say that, for the first time in its life, it had found something worth protecting. And in that shared silence amidst the shadows of the jungle, Lyra understood. The creature had chosen her, not out of necessity, but out of something deeper, something more profound. Their journey was far from over, but now, for the first time, it felt like they were not just surviving. They were becoming something more than what they had been. Together, the storm clouds gathered on the horizon, darkening the once vibrant sky. The jungle, once alive with the sounds of birds and insects, had grown eerily quiet. Lyra could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her, thick and suffocating. Something was coming, something that would test everything they had built together. The past few days had been quiet, too quiet. The shadows that lurked in the jungle seemed to be watching them, waiting. But Lyra knew the predators didn't just hunt in silence. They waited for the right moment to strike. And she had a feeling that moment was close. Her gaze flickered to the apex predator, who was standing a few paces away, its sharp eyes scanning the darkening jungle. The creature had been unusually restless, pacing back and forth, its large, muscular body tense. It was waiting too, waiting for the inevitable. Lyra clenched her fists, her heart racing. She had never seen the predator this alert, this focused. It wasn't just a beast, it was something more. And tonight, she would need every ounce of that strength. And then she heard it. A low, guttural growl echoed through the trees, sending a chill down her spine. From the depths of the jungle, the shadows stirred. Ilara's eyes widened. More creatures. She had no idea how many, but she knew they were coming, drawn by the scent of blood, the scent of weakness. Her breath quickened as she gripped her weapon tightly. It wasn't much, but it was all she had. She had learned to survive by relying on her wits, but tonight survival would mean something far more. She glanced at the apex predator, its glowing eyes locked onto her as if sensing her fear. There was no need for words. The bond they had forged in silence had spoken louder than anything else could. The ground trembled beneath them as the creatures closed in. Ilara's heart hammered in her chest as she felt the pulse of danger rippling through the air. There was no turning back now. The first of the creatures appeared, a massive four-legged beast with jagged spines along its back and glowing red eyes that gleamed with malice. Its growl echoed through the jungle, and Ilara could feel the earth shake with each step it took toward them. But the apex predator was ready. With a roar, the predator lunged forward, its claws extending, its powerful frame crashing into the creature with terrifying force. The battle was fierce, a flurry of claws and teeth, of roars and snarls that shook the very ground beneath them. The beast fought back, but the apex predator was a force of nature, relentless and unforgiving. It tore into the creature with savage precision, its massive jaws snapping shut around its neck, crushing the life out of it in one swift motion. But there were more, so many more. From the trees, more figures emerged, shadowy, terrifying shapes, each one more deadly than the last. Ilara's breath caught in her throat as the predator fought one, then another, but there were too many. They were being overwhelmed. The jungle itself seemed to come alive with the sounds of the battle, the crack of branches breaking, the shudder of the earth underfoot, the roar of violence filling the air. Ilara fought with everything she had, using her small knife to fend off the creatures that lunged at her. Her mind raced, but her body moved with instinct. She wasn't just trying to survive anymore, she was fighting for something more. For the predator. For herself. For their future. As she turned to see another massive creature charging toward her, Ilara felt the world slow down. She could see it coming, the sharp claws gleaming in the fading light. But before it could reach her, there was a blur of movement, a flash of silver scales and glowing eyes. The apex predator was there, a wall of fury between her and the beast. It struck with unrelenting force, the ground shaking beneath its weight as it pinned the creature to the earth. The battle raged on, but Ilara's fear began to fade. She wasn't alone. The apex predator was there, fighting with every ounce of its being to protect her. It was not just a guardian. It was a partner, a force of nature that had chosen to stand beside her. The final blow came with a deafening roar. The last of the creatures lay dead, its body crumpled beneath the massive paws of the apex predator. The jungle fell silent once again, but the air was thick with the aftermath of the battle. Blood stained the ground, and the scent of death hung in the air. Ilara stood panting, her heart still racing, but as she looked at the predator, something inside her clicked. They had done it. Together they had faced the darkness of the jungle, the dangers that lurked in every corner, and they had emerged victorious. The predator turned to her, its eyes glowing softly in the fading light. And Ilara knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. Whatever came next, they would face it together. No longer just survivors, but warriors bound by something far deeper than fear. The resolution. The jungle was quiet now, the only sounds the soft rustling of leaves and the distant calls of birds settling back into the shadows of the trees. The air, once thick with tension, had cleared, leaving behind a profound stillness that seemed to echo through the forest. Ilara stood at the edge of the clearing, her body bruised but alive, her breath steadying after the chaos of the battle. Beside her, the apex predator stood tall, its bloodied body heaving as it caught its breath. The creature was scarred, marks of battle etched into its dark, glistening scales. But there was no mistaking the strength in its stance. It was alive. They were alive. They had survived. Together. Ilara's eyes lingered on the creature's wounds, the deep cuts along its side, the gashes on its legs. But even in its most battered state, it stood proud. It had fought for her, not because it had to, but because it had chosen to. And in that choice, something had been forged between them, a bond that could never be broken. She took a cautious step forward, then another, until she was standing next to the creature. She reached out, her hand brushing against its scales, feeling the warmth of its skin beneath her fingers. The predator didn't flinch. Instead, it lowered its head slightly, acknowledging her touch as if to say, "We are one now." Lyra had never felt more certain of anything in her life. The galaxy was vast, filled with dangers beyond her comprehension. But in that moment, standing beside the most feared creature in the universe, she knew they were unstoppable. Together, they had faced the impossible. Together, they had rewritten their fates. But even as the battle ended, as the jungle returned to its quiet, timeless rhythm, there was no denying the weight of what had come before. Lyra could feel the echoes of the past reverberating in the air, the legacy of the apex, Predator's long history as a weapon, a tool of destruction. It had known nothing but violence, nothing but war. But that had changed, and now it was time to move forward. Lyra, the voice resonated in her mind, deep and familiar. But there was something new in it now, something softer. "We are not bound by the past anymore. I am no longer a weapon. I am free. And so are you." The words hit her like a wave, and for the first time Lyra truly understood what the predator meant. The creature had found its redemption, its purpose, not in destruction but in protection. And in return, Lyra had found something she never thought possible. A companion, a friend, a partner in this vast, wild galaxy. "We have nothing to prove anymore," Lyra whispered softly, her voice barely audible in the stillness of the jungle. "Only the future to create." The creature turned its head, its glowing eyes locking with hers as if to say, "Yes, the future." And then, together, they began to walk. The jungle, once a place of fear, had become their sanctuary. The path ahead was unknown, the challenges still, looming on the horizon. But it no longer seemed so daunting, because they weren't just fighting to survive anymore. They were fighting for something more, for each other, for the chance to live on their own terms. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the jungle, Lyra and the apex predator walked side by side, the last remnants of battle behind them. The world was vast and the galaxy was still filled with dangers they couldn't yet understand. But whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. Lyra's heart felt lighter than it had in weeks. The bond between them was no longer just survival. It was a promise that no matter what came next,